Good. I knew I was going to be preaching on anger, so I asked my sister, can you remember a time that stands out to you where I blew up in anger as a kid? And she always kind of refers to this moment because I've asked her this before. And she'll refer to this moment. I think I was about 10 years old. She was about 9. We had a cousin living at our house at the time, and she was a little older. And for some reason, I thought it'd be a great idea to lock my cousin in a linen closet, right? A linen closet, not much room in a linen. You open it, it's shelves, right? So yeah, that's where I thought would be a good place to lock her up. And my sister, wanting to come to her rescue, I forced her to stay on the couch, and I physically forced her to stay there so she wouldn't help this cousin. And I asked her, why do you think I did that? And she had no idea. We don't really understand why that was, except she knew that I had these moments where I would have these outbursts of anger. Okay. There was on my bedroom door, going into my bedroom door, I would always see a KNBR 680 blue and yellow bumper sticker that was like about a foot off the floor on my bedroom door. It was about this big, about the size of a foot, because I had kicked my door in anger and put a nice big hole in it. Yeah, this was me when I was a kid. All right. So I had these moments of anger, but why? Don't know. Don't remember. What I can put together is that when I was about that age, 9, 10, I was pretty insecure. And I think I was grasping for some moments that I could feel like I was in control. I wanted to feel like I was in control. And so that was the way I went about it. I wanted to try to dominate my cousin and my sister and my door. And so that's what I did. But it's complicated. Anger is a complex issue. We can call it a feeling, but it is more than a feeling. Anger involves your beliefs, your intellect, your mind, your volition. All of these things factor into our anger. It's complex. Some people express anger out overtly through verbal abuse, verbal assault. Other people, it's a little more subtle in the form of cynicism or being snide or a little sarcasm here, a little dig there. That's a form of anger. Passive aggressiveness is a form of anger. So anger can express itself in all different kinds of form. Go ahead and survey for yourself. What are the ways that I naturally express anger? What are the ways that I naturally express anger? So anger is more than just a feeling. And this is why the writer Robert Jones defines anger this way. Quote, our anger is our whole-personed active response of negative moral judgment against perceived evil. Okay, I'll say that one more time. Our anger is our whole-personed active response of negative moral judgment against perceived evil. Okay, what I like about that is it's whole-personed. It's a whole-personed active response. It involves my feelings, my mind, my behaviors. Everything is involved when it comes to anger. So in this text that we're looking at today, again, I said we'd look at verses 26 and 27 primarily. So if you still have that there, we're going to jump around the scriptures a little bit, but for the most part, we'll stay there. In verse 26, Paul basically has 2 commands. And in the Greek, the NIV is not really great about it. It is literally be angry and don't sin. Those are the 2 commands right there in verse 26. It is literally be angry and don't sin. Now that first command, we're okay with that one, right? Be angry? Sure. Okay, I can do that. But don't sin in my anger? There's the challenge, right? That's the challenge. So when we're looking at anger, we're understanding something about anger that is sinful. But if he's saying be angry, then there must be good anger. All right. So we're going to look at bad anger, good anger, and then how to deal with anger. All right. That's what we're going to look at. Bad anger, good anger, and how to deal with anger. All right. First of all, bad anger. Bad anger. Bad anger is dangerous. It is dangerous. If you look throughout the scriptures, you're going to see how from Proverbs all the way into the New Testament, anger is talked about like it is a destructive force. Do you remember that in James? The tongue is a fire. The tongue just burns relationships down. It burns yourself down. It burns your relationship with God down. Okay, the tongue has the potential to do a lot in anger. If you think about anger in the Bible and some examples, I mean, the first one that I think of is Cain. Remember the very beginning, you've got Cain. He's angry at his brother Abel, and he's angry because Abel's sacrifice and his worship was accepted by God and Cain's wasn't. Cain's heart wasn't in it, and Abel's was. And so Abel received the favor, Cain didn't. There started this anger, jealousy. And what does God say to Cain? God says to Cain, remember? Do you remember this? Right? He says, your anger, Cain, is going to cause you to sin. Sin is crouching at your door and wants to master you, but you must master it. Right? Remember? And this is what from the very beginning, we have the destructive force of anger. Because what happened? We know what happened. Cain gave in to his sin. His sin controlled him. It crushed him. It crushed his brother. It alienated him from God. All right? And it all started with anger. Okay? So this is destructive. We can go throughout scriptures and point out some different examples. But I also want to point out Jesus and what he said about anger. So if you want to look at it, you can. It's Matthew 5, verse 21. There we are in the Sermon on the Mount, right? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about anger. And here's what he says, verse 21. You've heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoa. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. What on earth, Jesus? I mean, we live in a culture that almost glorifies anger. When people cut each other down, when you look on the internet and you see someone interviewing somebody and they put the title, watch this talk show host destroy this person, right? You see these kinds of outlandish, over the top expressions of anger, like it's a wonderful thing when you can dominate and crush somebody out of anger. And Jesus is saying, you have any hint of that, and you're in danger of the fire of hell. Okay, so that's why we need to take a pretty good look at this. Don't just kind of swim in what our culture is doing when it comes to how to deal with anger. Don't take our cues from the media or from our culture. We need to take them from Jesus. What Jesus is saying here, wow. I tell you that anyone who is angry. So what does he mean by that? It's the destructive kind of anger. We'll talk about the good anger in a minute, but the destructive kind of anger that has contempt for someone else, right? That's why he says, if you call someone a fool, if you call someone an idiot, you have contempt in your heart towards someone else. That kind of anger, if you continue in that kind of anger, your life trajectory is along the road to hell. That's what he's saying, okay? So if you continue in that destructive kind of anger and you just let it live in you and reside in you, and you have contempt for other people out of that, then you're paving the way to hell, is what Jesus is saying there. So it's serious. It's serious. This is the danger of anger. It's a downward spiral if we don't deal with it. So it moves from anger to contempt to belligerence, which is verbally assaulting somebody. You're ranting on Twitter against somebody or something, and you're just going off, or you're ranting in person, or you're just verbally just slandering somebody. That's the slow spiral to hell, is what Jesus is saying. If we don't deal with it in the moment, if we don't deal with it, this is the danger of it, okay? So that's bad anger. Bad anger. Bad anger is the kind of anger that is just a self-justifying kind of anger that leads to contempt, belligerence, and then destruction. All right, good morning. Happy to be in church today, right? Yes, wonderful. So that's bad anger. Pretty bad picture. Good anger. Let's go to good anger. What? Good anger? There's good anger? This is going to mess with you if you think that the Christian life is just about being nice. Okay? This is going to completely mess you up. If you think Christians are just called to be nice people, then what are you going to do with this? Be angry. Okay? Be angry. There is a good anger that the Bible talks about. And if we're not angry appropriately, then something's wrong. Something is wrong if we are not able to express anger. And now, here's the thing. So yeah, maybe you did believe growing up, someone said, Christians have to always be nice. Or you grew up in a culture, okay, some cultures, like Asian cultures in particular, you are taught to repress your feelings, to repress your emotions. Don't express those emotions. Even if it's joy, don't get too over the top with that joy thing, right? Joy, anger, don't express it. So culture can be a factor that keeps you from expressing good anger. Some people who have gone through some really hard things in their life, their goal is to just not feel at all. I don't want to feel anything, because any kinds of feelings, if I give into my feeling, then I'm going to give into pain from my past. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to just repress my feelings. Well, when you try to repress your pain, you end up repressing all of your feelings. And so you won't even express joy, let alone anger. Okay, a lot of things that can keep us from expressing good anger. But here's the thing about good anger. You want to know what it is? Good anger is slow anger, right? Well, remember what God said to Moses when Moses was on the mountain on Sinai in Exodus 34, Moses said to God, I want to see your glory. Show me your glory, right? Remember? What does God do? God reveals himself and he says these words, I am the Lord your God, full of compassion and grace, slow to anger, and abounding in love. Isn't that interesting? That the way that God introduces himself, the way that he leads, the impression he wants to leave on you is that he's compassionate, he's gracious, and slow to anger. This is how God reveals his glory, right? He's revealing his glory to Moses, and he says, you want to see my glory? Part of my glory is that I'm slow to anger. I'm slow to anger. There's long suffering. There's patience in God's anger. God is not just, reacting out of his own just momentary anger. Okay, and we'll talk about that. Why is that? God is angry at sin because God is holy and God is just. And so he is angry at sin. But here's the thing about sin. Sin resides in people, and God loves people. God loves people, hates the sin in people. And like a good father, remember, God is a good father who loves his children. God hates anything that keeps his children in pain, in bondage, and in destruction. Because he's a good father, right? If you're a parent, you have kids, you don't want anything bad to, get your kids addicted or get your kids trapped or get your kids down the wrong road. You hate those things. You hate those things. Same thing with God. And so God hates those things. And so we have in Hebrews that the father disciplines his children because he's trying to weed out those things that are destructive for his children because he hates those things. And he loves that his children can live and love in the freedom that he has for them. So why is God slow to anger? Because he doesn't want to destroy people. He loves his children. He loves us. But what does he want to do? He's aiming at those things in our lives that lead to our destruction. And so he's going to lead us through trials. He's going to lead us through different various circumstances. So he can test that out. He can bring out those destructive attitudes, those destructive addictions, those other loves that are in our hearts. And he wants to weed those out. So he's going to go slow. He's going to go slow with us because that's what a loving father does. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? The slow anger of God? This is the slow anger that God wants us to exhibit with one another. The slow anger that hates the sin, that hates the thing that destroys us, but loves our brother and loves our sister and loves our spouse and loves our coworkers. That's what he wants us to do. So we need to have the kind of eyes that look only at the problem that leads to sin and not at the person. Because that's bad anger. Bad anger is when you look at a person, you have contempt for the person. And you characterize them as a fool or an idiot or all those things, none of which are helpful. But when we look at a person and we see what is the problem, you can hate that problem, but love that person, right? You see the difference between bad anger and good anger in that? Bad anger just has contempt for the whole person. Good anger has contempt for the sin in that person, but still loves that person, right? You see how helpful this is in our society today and how far our society is from this? So far from this. Anyone who disagrees with us, we're just trained to just castigate them, put them in a whole tribe of enemies so that we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And that is just a ship that's sailing on the way to hell. Okay, that's what Jesus said. So we need to be able to discern and have contempt for the right things, to be angry about the right things and not have malice towards somebody in particular. How does God demonstrate this? All the time, right? God demonstrates this all the time. Read the book of Hosea and you see how slow God's anger is. But in the New Testament, very interesting in Mark chapter 3. If you want to turn there, you can. Mark chapter 3, Jesus was in the synagogue and he noticed how the religious leaders were just indifferent to a man who had a shriveled hand, right? So there's a man with a shriveled hand. The religious leaders just don't have any compassion for him. And it burns Jesus up. Look at Mark 3, verse 3. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Okay, Jesus is bringing dignity to this man in this room in the synagogue. Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. Look at Jesus's reaction in verse 5. He looked around at them in anger. In anger. Why was he angry? He was angry because of their willful indifference to this man and his suffering. He was angry about it and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. This is Jesus, right? So Jesus is the one full of compassion, the man of sorrows. But here's Jesus, angry and distressed. And he said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. In this scene, we have a picture of how we can see good anger. Good anger is Jesus looking at the problem, looking at people and their stubborn hearts, the indifference in their hearts, but he's able to then also show compassion to the man. That's what we need to lead with. Compassion that's able to address the problem. Okay? That's what we need to lead with, as Jesus does there. So, how do we deal with anger? We got the bad anger, we got the good anger. How do we deal with anger when it arises? I think I have 3 things. I might have 4. I may reserve a 4th, okay? Just in case something comes to me, right? Number one, how do you deal with anger? Name it. Name your anger. Name your anger. Here's a wonderful Psalm, Psalm 4. And in verse 4, basically, you see what Paul has been quoting from. Paul is he's mining Psalm 4 for his language. Look what it says in Psalm 4:4. Tremble and do not sin. You could translate tremble as be angry. Like, that's what you do when you're angry. You're right? You're just getting, you're shaken up. That's what the psalmist is saying. Tremble, be angry, and do not sin. And then what does it say? When you are on your beds, search your hearts and be silent. Oh, is that good advice when you're angry? Right? Search your hearts and be silent. So what is he saying? He's saying, name your anger. Name it. What's going on in your heart right now? There's a couple of things that I think you can identify when you're trying to search what is going on in me. One, what triggered your emotion? What triggered your emotion? Just write it out. What did someone say or do that made you react this way? Write it out. Like, okay, he said this. And then, what's your reaction? What's your trigger? And what's your reaction? What are you feeling inside of you? Did your heart start to race? Did you start getting angry? Name the emotion that you started to feel. Sad, frustrated, angry, rage, belligerence, contempt. What were the actual emotions you were feeling? So name it, right? Name what triggered this. Okay, whoa. What caused me to react this way? And then 2, what's my reaction? What am I actually feeling right now? Okay, name it. This is a big step. This is particularly helpful when you are trying to help somebody just calm down, like trying to get somebody who's just hot, to be able to get them to take a breath and just say, give me a word that describes what you're feeling right now. Really helpful. If you can get somebody to actually get their mind off of the perpetrator, the one who offended them, to themselves so that they can reflect on what they're feeling, you've done well. Especially parents, man. If you can get there, boy, man, that's a tough mile to go from getting someone to look away from the perpetrator to themselves to reflect. Huge. But name it. Okay, Psalm 4:4. Name it. Big step. Number 2, name your desires. Why are you angry? What is causing your desires to go crazy? James chapter 4, verse 1, really, really helpful verse, okay? James 4:1, okay? It says this, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Good question. What causes fights and quarrels? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? There it is. You're angry because you want something, okay? You want something. You are in a fight because somebody was taking something away that you want. or was blocking your view or blocking your path to get what you want, right? This is traffic. This describes traffic rage all over, right? You want to go somewhere and you want to get there fast. The person who just cut you off from the thing you want. And so road rage. James, it's right there in James. You don't have to go far from James. It's there, right? What is it? It's the desires within you. So what are your desires? Verse 2, by the way, just to read on, James 4:2. You desire, but do not have. So you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want. So you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. Okay. So what is it that you want? What is it that you want? That's the next thing. When you're angry, ask yourself, what is it that I want? Name your desire. What was the desire that was taken away from you by what some person did or some person said? What is it that you desire so much that it's making you angry? What is your desire that is making you so angry right now? Do you desire it too much? Do you desire it so much that it's consuming you? Do you desire it so much that you're preoccupied with it, that you think about it a lot? Do you desire it that much? And when you don't have it, do you lash out? Do you lash out when you don't have it? So what this does is, if we're looking at our desires, it's allowing us to examine, do I have appropriate levels of desire? Do I have appropriate levels of desire? Or are my desires overwhelming me or out of control? Okay, you might think right now for yourself of a conflict that you're in right now, and you can think, what is it that I want? What is it that I'm desiring that's making me so angry? And is my desires inordinate? Is it too much? Is it too much for the desire? For example, do I love my comfort? Do I love the approval of others? Do I love my job? Do I love my girlfriend? Do I love my boyfriend so much that if anyone got in my way on any of those things, I would lash out? Well, that tells you that you're probably wanting those things too much. Wanting those things too much. My girls were kind enough to provide very fresh illustrations of anger for me that I can now share with you. Very kind of them. Last night. So Cadence, she wants to sit on one side of the couch so she can read her book, but on that side, Caroline's feet were up. And rather than asking her to move her feet, she just takes those feet of Caroline and moves them away and over, and Caroline is not having it at all. So there you have two girls. Cadence sits down on the couch, Caroline's on the couch, and their feet are at each other and they're kicking each other, right? And as they're kicking each other, Caroline, she gets closer and closer to Cadence and kicks Cadence in the face. It's a good kick, like flush right on the face. Very interesting to watch Caroline in that moment, because Caroline realized, whoa, I just really crushed my sister in this moment. And her reaction was to then start crying and run and go upstairs in that moment. So I go up there in a moment and then I ask her about it. So are you hurt? Why are you crying? Are you just upset at Cadence? And she says, no, I'm not hurt. No, I'm not upset at Cadence. And what's going on with her is that she realized her desire to create some space on the couch, to have some respect from Cadence, her desire to maintain her personhood and keep herself to herself, that desire was trumped by desire, by her love for her sister. She realized that her desire to maintain her personhood had gone over her desire to love her sister. When she kicked her sister's face, she realized that, whoa, my desire for payback and vengeance right now just trumped my love for my sister. And that's wrong. She realized that was wrong in that moment. That's why she fled upstairs. She didn't know what to do with that feeling. Okay, so that's at a kid version. What all of us have to think through for ourselves is, what is the love and desire that I have right now, whether it's for comfort or my job or just forward progress in my vocational path in school or whatever it is. What is it that I am loving so much that it's making me love that more than love the person that's in front of me right now? Right? Because if my love is willing to crush somebody right now, then that love is controlling me. Just like God told Cain, sin is crouching at the door and it wants to control you. In that moment, we have to name the desire. What is it that I want? And how do I reorder that desire appropriately? Okay. Make sense? Okay, so name the desire. And thirdly, and probably last, address it quickly in love. Okay, number 3, address it quickly in love. If you go back to Ephesians chapter 4, there's one more thought that Paul gives to this. He says, be angry, don't sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Now, some people take that very literally. They say, uh-oh, it's almost bedtime. We haven't addressed this thing. We really need to address this thing. Okay. So it's like 7:45 p.m. and your spouse just said something that really riles you. You look at your watch and you go, oh no, what time is sunset? Sunset's at 8:05 tonight. We have 20 minutes to address this anger. Oh no, we don't have enough time. Okay. That's probably a little legalistic when it comes to dealing with your anger before the sun goes down. Because what do you do if you're like in Alaska and there's like a whole day where the sun does not go down, right? So what are you going to do with your anger then? You're just going to disobey God's word because the sun didn't go down, or the sun is always down, whatever it is. So what is the point of this? Paul's just saying, look, address your anger quickly. Why? You know what happens when you don't address your anger quickly? What happens? What happens when you let your anger fester, right? It festers for a while and you start to harbor this resentment against this person. And then let's say that person that, for example, let's say, a guy is angry at another woman for dumping him, okay? And doesn't address that anger, doesn't address it, lets it fester. What happens? He becomes not only angry towards that woman, but can become angry towards all women. And just, hey, they're all just mean and they're all just, right? And so that's what happens. Anger starts to color the way that you see people. And you get into bad anger, that contempt anger for people. That's why you don't want to let the sun go down. You want to address your anger quickly, or it becomes bad anger, which is contempt, which then leads to belligerence, which leads you down the road to hell. Okay, so that's why you want to address it quickly, and address it in love. Address it in love. Turn your Bibles just one more time to 2 Corinthians chapter 2. Just move to the right a little bit. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 5. If someone has wronged you, you need to let it go. You need to let it go and forgive quickly. So here's what we have. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 5. If anyone has caused grief, okay, if anyone has made you angry, he has not so much grieved me as he's grieved all of you to some extent, not to put it too severely. The punishment inflicted on him by the majority is sufficient. So here's somebody who did something wrong. They did it in the church and they did it against everybody, but that person is contrite about it. They've recognized, oh, I did something. I offended someone. So Verse 7, now instead, you ought to forgive and comfort him so that he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. I urge you, therefore, to reaffirm your love for him. Another reason I wrote you was to see if you would stand the test and be obedient in everything. Verse 10, anyone you forgive, I also forgive. And what I've forgiven, if there was anything to forgive, I've forgiven in the sight of Christ for your sake, in order that Satan might not outwit us, for we are not unaware of his schemes. Do you see what Paul is saying? Paul is saying, look, you're angry. It's appropriate that you're angry towards somebody who did you wrong, who did the assembly, the church wrong. But that person has realized what they've done. And so if they've realized what they've done, you cannot nurse a grudge. You cannot retain that bitterness. You have to forgive. And what is forgiving? It's letting it go. You've got to let it go. Okay? Just let go the bitterness. And Paul brings up something very important. What if we don't? What if we hold on to it? What if we allow it to fester? We are then allowing the devil a foothold. Now, this is exactly where Paul goes back. And if you go back to Ephesians chapter 4 and you look at verse 27, do not give the devil a foothold. What does that mean? What's a foothold? It's an opportunity. Don't let the devil have an opportunity to claim some land in your heart. Don't give him a foothold. So if someone has done you wrong, let it go. You've got to forgive. You've got to forgive. Well, does that remind you of anybody? Have you ever experienced that from anybody? Sure you have. That's the way God was with us, right? God was the same way with us. So we need to be able to forgive. I want to add one more thing to this and how we address it. Address it by quickly, address it through forgiveness, but lastly, address it with kindness, Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer turns away wrath. Isn't that awesome? I love that. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. I've had my kids say some pretty mean things to me because they're kids, and kids do these kinds of things. I had one kid who will remain nameless who said, I wish I had another daddy. I want another daddy. Now, if you hear that and you really hear that, that hurts, right? When you hear your daughter, or your child say that to you, and you probably have if you're a parent, at some point, even when they're in their like 20s, right? Your child might come to you and say, I wish I'd never had you as mom or a dad, right? They say things that are just can be crushing, right? And in that moment, you have some choices to make. You can either, which I'm prone to do, is like pout, put your head down, walk away, right? Feel sorry for yourself. That's one option. The other option is fire back, right? Oh, yeah? Where do you think this house came from? Where do you think the clothes on your back came from? Where do you think the food you ate today came from, right? You could do that. You can lash back, right? Wow, Jeff, you really do have some anger issues. Harsh words, right? We could reply back with a harsh word or a gentle answer. Now, here's where a gentle answer goes with slow anger. A gentle answer to my daughter in that moment would say something like, look, I know you're mad, but right now you love something more than you love me. I just want to point that out to you. You love something more than you love me right now. There's something in your heart, something you want that is more important than your love for me. No, I don't have to go much further than that. I don't have to say I don't have to diagnose it and lead her to the altar so she can, ask for forgiveness and pray to God and all those things. I don't have to say any of that. I can just answer the problem, right? It's being able to look at the problem and not the person and say, look, my Caroline or Cadence, is not my enemy. But what is the sin that led her to have those disordered desires, where she desires something more than her love for me. Okay? That's a gentle answer. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Okay? So this is how we go about it in the moment. In the moment. You ever hear that verse where it says in Romans 12, 19 and 20, says this, Romans 12, 19, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. There are just times in which you just got to leave some people to God's wrath. We cannot take it upon ourselves, but we have to let God take care of them. Okay? We do what we can to love them. We love them. We offer a gentle word. We forgive them. But if they continue to be belligerent, there's just sometimes nothing you can do, but just leave them in God's hands. That's just, that's why I wanted like option for a fourth point, something there. Sometimes we have to address it by not addressing it and leaving it to God. But I want you to notice this in verse 20, Romans 12, verse 20. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you'll heap burning coals on his head. Now, real quick, do you know what that means? Burning coals on his head? One commentary said this: sometimes in that culture, a person's fire went out and he needed to borrow some live coals to restart his fire. Giving a person coals in a pan to carry home on his head was a neighborly, kind act. It made friends, not enemies. So you see what that burning coals, when you offer kindness to somebody, you're heaping burning coals on their head. That's not saying, oh, you're going to make a burn. You're just saying you are making a friend. You're making a friend. So this is what is extraordinary about the gospel, because this is what God does for us. God looks at us and he has every right to be angry with us because we rejected him. We said, no, Lord, I want to go my own way. I want to be my own master. And we rejected him, went our own way. And God instead, what does he do? He offers kindness. He offers Jesus. He offers forgiveness. Friends, I want you to think today of God. As we come to the table of the Lord right now, would you just consider God's posture towards you? He had every right to be angry against our sin, but what did he do? He sent Jesus to absorb the punishment, to absorb the anger for us, so that we would never, ever have any condemnation, and all we would know is his complete love. That's how God loved us. What the scriptures are telling us is essentially this: love others the way you've been loved. Deal with others the way you've been dealt with by God himself. Be angry, but don't sin. Don't sin. Deal with it quickly and don't let the enemy have a foothold, right?